Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Actually, 115 was killed yesterday or Thursday. The intention of the author was currently with a concealed carry permit you can carry on a motorcycle, but unlike in a car, you don't have a place to put it if you're just traveling from one place to the other and are taking your firearm. So what it would have allowed you to do is to have it concealed maybe in the saddlebags or even on you, but you would have had to go to open carry or some other form once you got 10 feet away from the motorcycle. So it was for transportation only, and I did support it.
Anybody else? Senator Nesbitt?
Yeah, this is a dead bill, but it seems to come back year after year. This just doesn't seem like a week where we need easier access to guns in America. And this bill was particularly problematic. If you're trying to secure a gun on a motorcycle, it's not nearly as safe as being able to lock it in the trunk of a car or something like that. And so I was opposed to it, and I was opposed to the reconsideration of it.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to HB 1199. HB 1199. Do you support or oppose HB 1199 to prohibit collective bargaining in higher education? If you oppose or support, what is your rationale? Go ahead, Senator Nesbitt.
Yeah, 70 years ago, the United Nations and the U.S. signed on to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the 23rd part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that everybody has the right to create or to join a union. It's a basic human right, and I don't think the state legislature should be in the business of rolling back basic human rights. Thanks.
Anyone else? Representative Curd?
Well, 1199 made it successfully through the House of Representatives, as probably the person who wrote the question knows. Hasn't had its day in court yet in the Senate. That comes up on Monday in the State Affairs Committee, which I happen to serve on. So we've been getting educated on it by both proponents and opponents to the measure. And I think we're going to have a fair hearing for it on Monday, and then we'll kind of see what the will of the State Affairs Committee is. But it seems like there is additional information that has been presented since it originally passed, and there's more coming through the weekend. So I'll be very interested in what the proponents and opponents both have to say. I try not to prejudge my position on any particular piece of legislation until we get a chance to hear about it in the committee. So at the close of business on Monday, you'll know whether the full Senate can consider it or not. But it's a great question, and I encourage those of you that it has meaning to continue to contact us and let us know what your position is.
Great. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Thank you. This was Speaker Mickelson's bill, and the theory behind him bringing the bill was that the Board of Regents needed to be able to react quicker to situations when the students dictated that they needed education in a different area, you know, particularly with employment, you know, kinds of opportunities, maybe for an engineer or, you know, something of that nature where it was more technical, that he felt that the Board of Regents wasn't able to react quickly enough to be able to establish those courses that the students wanted to take. And so it was for those reasons that I supported the bill. Honestly, it barely squeaked out of the House. It needed a majority vote, which is 36, and it got 37 votes. So now it's on to the Senate.
Anyone else? All right, and we welcome Representative Lateral here. We know it's ugly outside, so we're glad you made it. And everyone else had a moment, had 90 seconds to introduce themselves and share committee assignments and how long you've been in the legislature, so we'll give you that same opportunity.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. Isaac Latterell from South Dakota. This is my 6th year. I'm a majority whip. I serve on the State Affairs Committee as well as Taxation Committee. And I'm excited this year because we've really had a lot of opportunities to work more things from the ground up. A lot of times in the session, we can see that second floor has a lot of influence. The governor's office drives the agenda. As things have gone along in the years since I've been there, we've been working better together with the House and the Senate, trying to get more ideas from the individual members, work together and coming up with a product and having more influence. And that's one of the main things that I think that we can leave, as we have an 8-term total. If I'm reelected next year, we'd have a total of 8 years. But one of the things I think we want to leave is strengthening the legislative branch, because what that does is that empowers people to make sure that their agenda is represented as strongly or more strongly than the governor's office. So look forward to the questions today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. The next question is regarding HB 1184. HB 1184 regarding concentrated animal feeding lots. Should CAFOs be relieved of the burden of striking fair deals with their neighbors for the privilege of disposing of their animal waste? Again, the question is regarding HB 1184, and the question is, should CAFOs be relieved of the burden of striking fair deals with their neighbors for the privilege of disposing of animal waste? Anyone have a response? Representative Otten?
Thank you. You know, I don't know if that bill is very well understood by some individuals. This bill does not alleviate all of that. You know, currently this is happening today already. These producers are already laying these lines down in the public right of ways, and there's already a permitting process that they have to go through, I believe, with the DOT. This really changes nothing. It just moves it to a different section of the code, in my opinion. I mean, they've been pumping that waste through those lines down the ditches and out through the fields for I don't know how many years. So I really don't understand where this changes anything, and it just moves it to the counties and allows the county commission to do it now. So it just moves it to a more local level, which I would think would actually provide more input by the citizens about where they want to put that line in the ditch and how they want to move that.
Anyone else? Yes, Senator Otten.
This is going into the state transportation. It's scheduled for its hearing at 9 o'clock Monday. We have not totally on our side heard the pros and the cons to it. What we are talking about is pumping it back out on a field. One of the concerns that I do have at this moment is when we pump it, a more or less a slurry, if you will, is it going to A, sink into the ground, B, when we get rains and whatnot, are we going to end up that with it in the ditch itself and have runoff? So there's a lot of questions. I expect it to be a fairly brisk debate, as we will say.
Anyone else? Representative Jameson?
I just wanted to add that if, for a city guy, you know, who's never really been on a farm and or seen these practices in person, what occurred to me, at least, is a reference back to that the county commissioners may authorize and regulate such use at their discretion, that local control is still there, and that was the safeguard for myself, so that's why I supported it.
Anyone else? Senator Nisbet, go ahead.
Great, thank you. My main concern about this bill, and again, we haven't looked at it yet on the Senate side, is just again, I approach it philosophically, that if this was a public utility, if it was an issue of, say, gathering methane gas from our landfill here in Sioux Falls and piping it to an ethanol plant, to me that seems like something it's a public use. But when we're taking a private company, a confined animal feeding operation, and treating it like a public utility, I'm troubled by that. And so I will take a hard look on this. I am likely to oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on. The next question is regarding House Bill 1111. Again, it's House Bill 1111. And we had a couple questions come in on this one. How do you feel about the current wording of this bill and how broad it is written? And if it only takes 2 criteria to be met to meet the definition of a street gang under Section 3 of the bill, Do you feel this is overly broad and profiles citizens? Go ahead, Representative Williamson.
Thank you. I don't think this is overly broad. I think it was specifically and set up to be narrow. In the bill, it says, if you are charged with a criminal activity, that you could also be charged with the crime in this bill. So let's take an example. Let's say you're a motorcycle club and you decide to have a poker run. And so you guys are out and going down the road, and one of you gets stopped for speeding. Okay, that's not a criminal offense. You cannot be charged with what's in this bill because you got a speeding ticket. Okay? Now let's say that a couple members of a gang decided to join you in your ride, and they saw one of their adversaries, and so they whip out their handgun and they shoot him. Well, that's criminal activity, and so then you could be charged with the gang activity in this bill. Other than that, it's pretty specific on that part of it, so it's a good bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lateral, and then.
Thank you. Okay, so as I'm reading the bill, a lot of times this has to do with the way that the bill drafts are written. The street gang is already defined in current law, so if you open the bill, you'll see that the street gang has already been defined. This bill is adding the definition of street gang activity, and it's listing the definition of street gang activity talks about attempted commission, conspiracy to commit, or solicitation to commit any crime. So it's really trying to target those people who are doing criminal activities, and there is different criteria given which could be criminal activity, but the street gang definition is already in law. This is just trying to be more specific about the kind of activities that are criminal that would start to get you into the definition of people who are doing criminal activity as a group. I don't know if that helps, but.
Thank you. Senator Spencer.
Thank you. Yeah, we have not yet fully seen this on the Senate side. It's just getting to us, but having read through it, and I guess having a son who goes to Sturgis often and so on, looking through this, I think there may be a little bit too stringent in some of the definitions, and I definitely want to look at some of those that may make someone who belongs to a vets organization, or some of these motorcycle groups are organized for charitable purposes and so on, and want to make sure that it is specific to gangs, and that somebody can't be inadvertently found guilty under this.
Senator Otten.
On page 2, as we start with line 19, 20, and 21, is some of my concerns. It says, where certain articles of clothing, colors, and insignia commonly associated with a street gang activity, other than that part of a fashion trend that indicates a street member is in a gang. A lot of our motorcycle groups, and it all goes on into tattoos and whatnot. They've been out there and they're tattooed up. I see some of the articles and whatnot, and I'm a little concerned, even though we haven't heard total, that I'm concerned with that section in itself, that we could actually be picking out groups of people just because I want to pull somebody over.
Thank you. Yeah, I voted against this bill in the House, mostly for the same reasons as what the good senator next to me said. I think, for the additional crimes, you have to be picked up and be charged under the street gang to begin with. It doesn't allow any additional charges, and the judge can add that. But I thought by adding some of these definitions and exactly what the senator was talking about, I think this probably went a little bit too far. So that's why I didn't support the bill.
Anything else? Go ahead, Senator Nisbah.
I just plan to oppose it as well.
Thank you. And then, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. We're gonna move on. And I do ask, I know it's hard to not express support or opposition to what you hear up here, but if you can restrain from doing that, I'd appreciate it. All right, our next question is regarding revenues. There were 3 bills that were listed on this one, HB 1274 regarding the tobacco tax, HB 1279 regarding video lottery, and HB 1294, excuse me, regarding alcohol. The question, incoming tax revenue is falling. What is your plan to fix or find an alternative source of revenue? And again, with income tax revenue falling, what is your plan to fix or find an alternative source of revenue? Go ahead, Representative Otten, and then Senator Nesbitt.
Well, I don't know if I'm overly interested in finding a new source of revenue, because that would mean more taxes on everybody and more fees paid by everybody. I guess the things that we could do is probably help promote, a healthy business climate in South Dakota, and maybe eliminate some of those rules and regulations. As our economy grows, the revenues will increase in the state, so I could much prefer to see that happen by businesses increase, by new businesses start up, than to impose any more new taxes and fees than we have to.
Okay, thanks. Senator Nesbitt, and then Senator Otten.
Great, thank you. In the question, there was a question about an income tax, or it said income taxes were falling, but I think maybe they meant sales taxes. And sales taxes are actually up a little bit. They were up in November about 8.6%. In December, they were up a little over 5%. It gave us a little more revenue to work with. That microphone's really echoey, Sarah. I don't know if you can do anything about that, John, or not. Well, I did sign off on one of those alcohol bills. One quick story. Commissioner Jeff Barth used to tell the story a couple of years ago. We had a drunk driver run into one of our sheriff patrol cars, and the person didn't have insurance and didn't have much money. So the county had to fix the car, they had to provide a public defender, they had to prosecute, and they had to put the person in jail. It was all paid for with your property tax, and it was really caused by because somebody was driving drunk. And alcohol is probably not paying its fair share of taxes in this state. So I would support some way of finding a higher alcohol tax to both deter problem drinking and to generate some revenue, because we have a lot of other deficits that aren't met in the state of South Dakota related to education in particular.
Thanks, Senator Otten, and then Representative Lateral, and then
1274 had been deferred to the 41st day, so that one is dead. One of my pet peeves up in the on taxation is it's the contractor excise tax, which I find as a VAT tax, and it's taxation upon taxation. You buy a product, you're taxed on it. You find a contractor who installs it, now you pay another tax on that tax, and I do not like that. So that has always left me to my other pet peeve, and that is our tax exemptions. Every time that we come up with an exemption, and in order, let me preface that, when you're looking at taxation itself, it must be broad in itself, so it is not picking any small group out and overtaxing them. But every time that you're given an exemption within that, that means then that something else has to be raised in order to raise the revenue. And we've now at almost $1.2 billion in exemptions, and I think we're going to end up having to take a firm look at some of these tax expenditures on exemptions.
Representative Lateral, and then Representative Willitson.
Yeah, I generally agree with what Senator Otten mentioned too. If I'm looking at trying to solve a tax revenue problem, I would much more likely be looking at tax exemptions. One of the things that I'm always harping on is making sure that we have an even playing field and that we're not picking winners and losers. And just one small example of a tax exemption that I've advocated for taking a look at trying to make more fair is the advertising revenue. The justification given for having advertising tax exempt is that each advertising dollar that you spend brings in more sales, and therefore taxes are paid on that. So that's the justification for why that tax exemption is there. Where the problem gets created is that the tax exemption on advertising only applies for advertising that's placed in the media. So what would happen is if somebody wanted to pay a graphic designer to design an ad for them, they would have to pay sales tax on that graphic designer designing the ad. Now, if you wanted to pay Midco or Kelloland to design the ad and place it in their media, you don't pay sales tax on any of the ad preparation or the placement of the ad in the thing. And that's actually unfair to people who don't happen to be a big media company. And with the internet, I think you can still get a tax exemption. And I also wanted to say that I did vote against the gang bill for the same reasons. I just didn't remember that at the time I was giving the explanation. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Stolzen.
Thank you. I guess first I'd have a little difficulty with the general premise that we need to raise taxes. I was recently at a conference where we went into a lot of the economic factors that are happening right now, particularly after the recent tax cuts on the federal level. And some of the people that were there that were on the panel were Art Laffer, Stephen Moore, Steve Forbes, and Larry Kudlow. And I had the opportunity to visit one-on-one with 3 of those 4. And they are all convinced we're going to see somewhere between a 3 and a 4% economic growth coming from these federal tax cuts. And with that extra money, I think our sales tax revenues will increase. We've seen them increasing the last couple months, and I'd say all of those economists believe that the economy will grow to the point that I don't believe we need to really be looking at additional sources.
Thank you. Anybody else? Representative Blake or Kurt, did you want to? Or if I put you on the spot, I couldn't tell if this was a yes.
That's okay. I think all of the discussion about revenue generation may be slightly premature. The state will have its case heard before the Supreme Court of the United States here in the next couple of months, and what I'm told is it looks like that, never know what the Supreme Court's going to decide, of course, but that might be favorable, and that would significantly change the revenue picture for the state of South Dakota. So I think before we get too anxious about finding additional revenue sources or increasing taxes that are already in place, we should probably take a more cautious approach and wait and see what the outcome of the Supreme Court case is, and then realize what revenues those are, and then we can make decisions about ways to raise additional funding should the need arise. But I think discussion this year this close to the Supreme Court challenge is probably premature.
Well, and that actually is a great transition, because somebody did ask, how do you all think the Supreme Court is going to decide on that issue? So if anyone else, so Representative Cruz, you provided me a great transition to another question, so it all worked out. But does anyone else have a comment on that? Senator Nesbitt and then Representative Jameson.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I did have a great bill that was killed twice. One of the things before I was in the legislature in 2016, when they passed the bill to raise teacher pay, that there was that they agreed that there would be a 1/10% decrease as soon as we got $20 million of additional revenue. And what my bill would have done is for each $20 million, instead of lowering the overall sales tax rate by 1/10%, would have taken 1 full percentage point off of our tax on food. Because I think it's just immoral to tax food. We're the only state in our region that taxes food. It leaves our small town grocers near all of our borders at a competitive disadvantage, because we're charging 6.5% on beef and milk and baby formula that they can drive across the state. And when they go across the state, they don't just buy beef and bread, right? They also buy toilet paper, they buy other things for the houses. So we're losing sales tax revenue, and we should fix that. And I had that bill, and I'll bring that bill back again next year, and I hope we have additional conversation, because this is a perfect opportunity for us to finally remove the sales tax on food, and I do hope we can get that done. Thanks.
Thank you. And now to Representative Jameson. And I apologize to Senator Kerr that I'm addressing you incorrectly. Go ahead, Representative Jameson, and then Senator Adam.
Thank you. So the real question was about the increasing revenues for the state, and the state is suffering from the same challenges that the city suffers from, in the fact that the majority of its income comes from sales tax, and that sales tax is collected on the purchase of items. And what I learned and understood to be the facts are that the egg producers and growers aren't spending like they did before. That's what's missing. So in essence, what we need to have happen is to have our ag economy improve. And how can we do that? And part of it could happen if, say, Brazil had a drought. That would improve our exports. Farmers would sell more, and they could spend more. So profits need to increase for our ag producers, really. That's the big piece. There was a comment about 1294, which is an alcohol tax. And Representative Wilson and I served on a tax committee. We reviewed that bill, and we essentially kind of changed it dramatically. We were opposed to a tax increase on alcohol, but what we did is we reformulated the disbursement of all that revenue that the state receives, how much gets back to the counties, how much gets back to the state and to the cities. And so look for at least some help to the counties in this relief. So thanks to Mark Willitson and his efforts for helping.
Senator Otten?
Thank you. I wanted to tag on to Senator Nesseba's remarks. Being on taxation all these years, we've had food brought up over the past 6 years that I've been up there. This was actually the first time in all those years that actually he brought something that was conceptually acceptable. I didn't vote for it, but he was on to something that I think that does need to be addressed. As far as the what we were talking about, 106, the hard probability is, I personally believe that it is going to, the courts are going to favor with us, and that the feds are actually in Congress are going to have to deal with it. And as far as revenue comes in, there's revenue projections all over the plate, and we're going to have to wait and see how things work out on that. But one other premise, I think we have, for myself, I've reached a point in time where basic commodities within food, your basics, your milk, your breads, butter, that sort of thing, I could go along with that. I think it's about time.
Senator Stelter and then Representative Willitson.
Okay. Briefly, the Supreme Court decision goes back to a case called Quill v. North Dakota, where they wanted to tax catalog sales. And the Supreme Court said that unless there was a physical location within your state, you could not tax those catalog sales. That has also been applied to internet sales. And right now, it's hurting our Main Street. About 13% of sales go over the internet. Estimates are in the 50 million range on the low end that we're currently losing. And it's definitely time for that to be looked at. The Supreme Court in that original ruling said Congress had to make that decision. But we've gotten to the point where it's having such a negative impact, not only on our sales tax revenue, but also on our Main Street retail businesses that are no longer able to compete in your small towns. So I'm very hopeful that the Supreme Court will reverse that decision.
Representative Willitson.
Thank you, Senator Stalzer stole some of my thunder, but I was going to start out by saying, see how easy it is for politicians to get way off base, because the original question was, what's your opinion of the Supreme Court decision on the streamlined sales tax? And we got a long ways off of that. But I would hope that the Supreme Court would find in South Dakota's favor. This is South Dakota's lawsuit. You know, we did take that case on, and I think it's truly a fairness issue that for our brick and mortar stores in South Dakota, they're at a 6.5% disadvantage in Sioux Falls to the online internet sales for that part. So I would hope that the Supreme Court would find in our favor. I've been encouraged by some of the preliminary findings and such that I think that's what they'll do, and I think it'll be good for South Dakota.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. The next one is regarding HB 1155. HB 1155, and it's simply, what is your position on HB 1155 that deals with language development of deaf and hard of hearing students? Again, HB 1155. Go ahead, Senator Nesbitt.
Yeah, I'll take that. I am the Senate sponsor on this. This is really a bill that was brought by Dan Allers from Del Rapids as a constituent bill. But one of the things we found about deaf and hard of hearing students, or deaf and hard of hearing individuals, is that they're often born to parents who are not deaf. And being able to have the resources to learn to communicate, you know, for those of us who are able to speak and hear and see, we learn to communicate probably from in the womb or even right after birth. And it's so much harder for students, for children, for infants who are hard of hearing. And what this bill would do is create resources, make resources available for those families, for deaf and hard of hearing students to be able to have that. Because what we find is that deaf and hard of hearing students oftentimes start kindergarten significantly behind. And this is one way to provide resources for them and be able to meet that need and to help them develop to be all that they can possibly be, which is what we want for all of our kids.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead.
This was a bill that I did support. You know, the conversations with the school districts and the board of regents and all that, dealing with the school for the deaf and how the programs are working. You know, they say things are working well and going along, and these students are being taken care of. Personally, I don't know if I'm 100% positive on that. I have an uncle that's deaf. My wife has an uncle that's deaf. And, you know, the difficulties that they had to go through in life to make sure that they were prepared for, I guess, a speaking world and a hearing world, you know, is hard for them and more difficult. And if I have to err on the side of caution to make sure that we're doing something a little extra to make sure that they're being taken care of, I'm all for that.
Anyone else? Okay. The next question is regarding SB 134. SB 134. The South Dakota has the smallest need-based grant program for higher education. SB 134 would have added a modest increase. Did you support higher education and workforce development, or would you have? Again, regarding SB 134. Senator Nesbitt? You're nodding.
Absolutely, yeah. $11.85. $11.85, that was 2016. That is how much money we gave in need-based aid to each Pell-eligible student in the state of South Dakota. In Minnesota, they gave about $1,600, not 16, $1,600, and Wyoming gave $2,200, while we were giving $11.85. But South Dakota is a leader in one thing. We have a really high share of our college graduates with student loan debt. And you know what? They also have a very high level of student loan debt. So we have a high share of people with debt, and the debt they have is above average as well. And why is that? It's because the state doesn't provide very much money at all for a need-based scholarship, and we need to fix this. And this was a bill that was sponsored by Senator Sutton, and unfortunately went down. We had a similar bill last year, but this is one of those needs that we need to address. It leaves us at a competitive disadvantage, and education is economic development, and we need to address this. Thanks.
I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
I just comment that this is in Appropriations Committee, and it's up to Senator Nesbitt to get it out to us before any of the rest of us can deal with it, because we haven't. Oh, it was tabled, so his committee. So it was killed in Appropriations. I'm having internet trouble. I didn't get to that part of it, but.
Thank you, Representative Lattimore.
Thank you. I just pulled the bill up here, and like Senator Stalzer said, we didn't get a chance to see it in the House or on the floor, but it does transfer $5 million away from Education Enhancement Trust Fund into a need-based grant program. And so really the question is, do you believe that the money should stay in that trust fund and be going towards general education, helping teachers, helping local school districts, divvy it up the way that they see fit, or do you think it should be moved over to the need-based grants? And I'm not sure which is the right answer. I tend to trust the school boards to try to prioritize that money because I know they're trying to grow and keep up with the challenges that they have too. So that's the way I lean, although I didn't hear the debate.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. We're going to stick to an appropriations question regarding mental health. What role does the legislature have to play in increasing access to mental health treatment? Would you support putting more money into mental health? Again, appropriations question. Senator Nessa?
Thank you, sir. I'm happy to answer every question up here. As the only Democrat, I feel like I need to take a shot at this, each one of these. And Senator Stolzer was right, that bill did go down in appropriations on straight party lines. So the 3 Democrats did vote against tabling and the 15 Republicans did vote to table. I am on the Mental Health Oversight Task Force, and I'm looking down the table here to see if other folks are on that. That was a bipartisan bill that was created, a bill that passed a year ago, creating this oversight task force, really trying to address this question, making sure that talking about access to mental health, but particularly the way that it intersects with our judicial system, making sure that our police officers and our first responders are given training to deal with people that are having mental health issues, and again, our court system, so working with prosecutors, public defenders, to make them better able to work with people that are having mental health issues as well. One of the things out of that task force is we have a real shortage of resources. We don't have enough psychiatrists, psychologists to meet the needs of folks in South Dakota. So I'm glad that we are working on this, but it's clearly a work in progress. But this is one of those things that we are doing in a bipartisan way, and it's one of the things that we are making progress on, and I'm happy to be a part of that. And again, so often when we are able to work together with both parties, we are able to make progress on things. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Representative Anderson, go ahead.
I would just add, I think the question was, would we be supportive, and I would be. I certainly haven't seen a bill that addresses this or a funding request in our House, but it's clear mental health has become more important in so many ways that maybe in the past we didn't really think about or know about and understand. And I think it's been highlighted in a lot of situations recently and other places where it's become more evident that we need to do more. So I think it warrants resources to address it, and I would support that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I have probably the largest stack of questions on various gun control bills or gun safety bills. So I'm going to try to summarize some of these. The first question, how do you feel about banning assault rifles and bump stocks? How do you feel about banning assault rifles and bump stocks? And there's about 9 or 10 different bill numbers I have, and I don't, which I can share, but I think the question is more general on that one, and we have several folks who have asked that question. Sarah Salter, go ahead, yeah.
I guess we'll take 2 of them. The assault rifles, you can take 2 firearms. One, take a Ruger Mini 14, which has a wooden stock, looks like any hunting gun, but you can still buy a 30-round magazine for it. An AR-15 is scary looking. It looks like a military, but it operates exactly like the Mini 14, which is not under attack by most people. It's purely a cosmetic thing, a legal gun versus what they want to ban. So I am opposed to the bans. The bump stock is a different critter. It's makes a semi-automatic rifle somewhat act like a machine gun. I guess I wouldn't have a huge problem if that was put under the National Firearms Act, so that you had to go through an initial ATF background check to own it, but I certainly wouldn't ban it outright.
Anyone else? Representative Lado?
Thank you. I like to look at some of these situations that we see where there's tremendous violence committed by people who are clearly having issues in this. Not only are they probably suicidal, but they're willing to harm other people just to try to find some kind of, you know, I don't know if it's meaning or what, but it's extremely troubling to me. And when I look at gun legislation, what I'm looking for is a specific policy that I can prove or say is likely to impact the outcome of these events that we're trying to prevent. And as far as the assault rifles and the bump stocks, banning those things, in my view, wouldn't affect these situations that we have seen recently. If you look at the ability to obtain a firearm today, it's pretty easy to obtain it legally. And also, if you wanted to purchase a firearm from somebody without a background check, you know, that's also easy to obtain. So the question is, if you all of a sudden ratchet up the requirements to purchase legal firearms to ways that are pretty extreme, are you going to make it more or less easy to get a firearm illegally? And I think you'll actually make it easier to get a firearm illegally if you start doing all these unreasonable things on legal firearms for citizens who are following the law. So what I'm looking for is actual policies that will help with the situations that we're trying to prevent, and not things that just feel good when you can't actually stop people from purchasing these things.
Senator Nisbet?
I'm really grateful to the stack of folks that asked this, the stack of questions, and all the folks that asked this. It's hard. This is a really hard question that we have obviously failed to address both in South Dakota and across the country. And until we organize, and that there's a whole bunch of you out there bringing forward ideas and really demanding this, it isn't going to change. It really is going to take a groundswell of folks like you to do that. One place is, I do think we could raise the age of purchase. I think we could require a background check for each of those. And I think we could look also at the way we tax ammunition. So we keep talking about shortages of revenue, our inability to give raises to teachers, inability to give raises to state employees. Maybe we need to be taxing bullets more than they are now and helping them pay for what economists call the externalities related to those. So. But I encourage you, if this is an issue that you care deeply about, continue to talk with your friends about it, continue to organize about it, because it's going to take a mass movement to make any progress on this.
Representative Woodson and then Representative Ott.
Well, thank you. I think I'd agree with Senator Stalzer on that part. But let's look at the big picture. You know, the tragedy that occurred in Florida, the tool that animal used happened to be an assault rifle. What about the situation that we had a year ago where the guy took a truck and drove through a sidewalk, killing people? The tool that he used was the truck. I think the big issue is that when we have someone that thinks it's okay to kill other people, they've got a mental problem. So we need to go back to the last question, and we need to start addressing some of the mental issues and trying to help people before they do these kind of actions. The tool that they use to commit these horrendous crimes is not what we should be fixating on. We should be fixating on the source of the problem, and that's the people that think it's okay to do this, and we need to get help for them.
Representative Ott.
Well, Representative Wilson and Senator Stalzer said it pretty well, and Representative Wilson kind of filled in a little bit there. It's not what they're using, it's the individual that's doing it, and you know what kind of mental state that they're in the first place. So, no, I'm not in favor of banning the assault rifles. I'm not sure what that definition even is. Is that how a gun looks? Is it how a gun operates? I mean, you know, semi-automatic weapon, I mean, there's all kinds of guns, hunting guns, and all of these are hunting guns in some shape or form. Shotguns are semi-automatic, so, I mean, what classifies it as an assault weapon? I don't understand what the definition of that is, and so I wouldn't be in favor of that. The bump stock is what I would consider an enhancement type device, like a scope or night vision that is used in hunting. So there's some rules and regulations with some of that stuff. I'd be willing to look at that part of it, I guess, but outright bans of those, I don't know, I'm probably not in favor of.
Representative Davidson?
I just wanted to add that the ban on assault weapons would be a tough lift for sure. The bump stocks as well. But what's really important is to consider the enhancement of background checks. It's still the human nature of the whole piece. That's what we really need to strengthen those parameters. I think that's our best chance of preventing future tragedies to occur. It's still the human piece, and I think that's the piece that needs to be addressed. And these tragedies, like what happened in Florida, they bring it up every time. And this discussion is warranted. It's a fair question, honestly. I just think that, as Senator Nespa said, the challenge is difficult to ban those weapons, but it's the human piece that we can address, and that's really where our efforts should be addressed. Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, go ahead. Senator Curtin?
I don't know about all of you, but I'm sure whether you picked up news of the Parkland, Florida tragedy via your Twitter account, or you saw it on the news, or you read it in a newspaper, I don't know how you could be a human and not be devastated by reading about what happened in our school. My 16-year-old son sitting up here in the corner this morning, and I can't imagine the pain and agony that would cause our family, nor the folks that are in Florida. And I don't think there's anyone sitting up here or in the executive branch in our state or at the federal level that if someone could tell us what the legislative vehicle is that would end the ability of all humans to stop wreaking havoc and homicide, that they wouldn't vote for it immediately. But as you've heard here, it's such a multifactorial event that occurs, and we're discovering more evidence every day that there were widespread systematic failures in Parkland, Florida, and that led to tragedy. Until we can figure out how to address all those individual pieces, I don't think we're going to stop tragedies like this. Many of you probably searched the internet like I did and found out that the largest single event that caused death in a school was in Bath, Michigan in the 1920s, and it was from a firebomb and not from a weapon. Until we can figure out how to detect early and prevent humans from wreaking havoc on others, I think we're going to have to continue to deal with these events. And if there was really a one-stop solution that would fix it, we'd all up here at this desk vote for it immediately. And until then, we're going to continue to chip away at it and try and keep our kids safe and our community safe.
Thank you. And again, you provide me a transition because a lot of the questions in that stack about gun safety also asked about how do we strengthen security in our schools. So I did want to ask that question as well. What ideas do you have to increase security in our schools? Anybody? Senator Curd, and then what ideas do you have to strengthen security in our schools?
Sure, I'll start with that since I gave you the segue again. The South Dakota legislature a few years ago was somewhat proactive in this arena, requiring that schools have a plan in place for such a tragic event as in Parkland. And for those of us that think that that's probably not going to happen in our state, you don't have to look back too far in history to understand that something did happen like that just south of where we're sitting today, much smaller magnitude, but it could have been worse. But the legislature asked our districts to put in place a plan for such an event, and back in 2013, whether you like it or not, there is an option for school districts to provide some of protective services within their schools through the Sentinel program at the Department of Criminal Investigation out in Pierre. To date, only 2 districts have taken the opportunity to avail themselves of that advanced training. I've had the opportunity to spend a few weeks out there after session meeting and training with those individuals. They can set up very realistic scenarios, classrooms, desks, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not the answer, but it is one. And until we really place value on our schools and people's ability to access them, much like we do jewelry stores or banks or even the White House or Congress, I think we're going to have difficulty. And until we stop the days when my old shop teacher would put a milk crate in the back door to let the sawdust blow out and providing a point of access, we're going to have to deal with the opportunity for people to gain access and wreak havoc in our schools. So there's multiple things that can be done. We're going to learn a lot out of Parkland, and I think you'll see the legislature respond, but try and do so in a way that also allows school districts to come up with solutions that fit what is best for them in their local environment.
Senator Stalzer and then Representative Ladero.
Yeah, reiterating with Dr. Kurd said that I did vote for the Sentinel program back in 2013 when that's put in. I have been an NRA certified firearms instructor since the mid-'80s. I have been certified to teach the enhanced pistol classes. I know Art Applin and Don McRae that are the instructors over at DCI. They always come to me when they want something changed in gun bills because I've worked with them. But the training these Sentinels go through is identical to what the police officers go through, except for the night portions of it. They go through a full 80 hours of training. We in Sioux Falls are fortunate. We have resource officers in our middle schools and our high schools provided by the city of Sioux Falls. And so when we put that Sentinel bill in, we were looking more like Hardin County where the sheriff's an hour away. Other things they can do though is, as Sioux Falls does, they can have you funneled through one main entrance. They can require IDs. They can make sure that only people that need access to the school have it. Keeping the peripheral doors locked so people have to funnel through that place. There are a number of things they can do, and the security officer for Sioux Falls Schools is in my district and is a good friend, and there are a lot of other things they're doing that I just don't care to talk about publicly.
Representative Ladero.
Thank you. Senators Kurd and Stalzer said it really well. We have to protect our kids. In the district that I represent, there was an incident there, and we're looking at this incident in Florida too. And reading some of the news stories, it looks like there was actually law enforcement waiting outside with their weapons drawn while the kids were sitting ducks inside. We can't leave our kids sitting ducks. And I have great respect for people in law enforcement who've gone through the training, who know how to wield their weapons well, but they're humans just like us. We can have more people trained to handle firearms appropriately. And we can get more people to be security officers in these schools so that there's somebody inside who can be there at the time of the incident. And I think we need to go that direction. We need to understand that more of us need to be trained to defend our children, and the more we do, the safer these places will be, the more likely it will be that somebody will steer away if they know that there's a lot of people trained in the use of defensive means, that there's more law enforcement and trained officers there. This will help protect our kids, and I think we should continue to go down that road. We should respond by more of us getting training in self-defense and firearms handling. Thank you.
Representative Jameson and then Representative Williamson.
Thank you. I think the question was really about what could the legislature do to strengthen security of the schools. And just from the structure of what the legislature does is provides funding for education and creates and could potentially prohibit activity from occurring. It's just my impression and desire to ensure that funding is appropriated in ways that the board regents feel like they need to do something in order to improve their security in their buildings, that we provide for that. The second is to maintain that they have local control, that we don't try to fix it from our seats out in Pierre. We allow those school boards to make those decisions on their own for what they think is best for them and their students. So it's almost a little bit like helping where we can, but
as well, getting out of the way.
Representative Wilson.
It's scary how much we think alike. But I would add to it that I think that I think the thing that we should recognize is that our local school boards have already taken this task in hand. And they are already doing many things to protect our students in our schools. Think about it. When I was in elementary school, you could walk in any door in the place, and people did. Now it's set up. You got to go to the front door. You have to prove who you say you are. You have to, have a reason to be there. I think our school administrators now are doing a good job at protecting our students. Should we close a blind eye then and say, well, we're okay? No. I think we need to continue to make sure that our kids have a safe place to learn and that they don't need to worry about, something like what happened in Florida, happening. I'll get there.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Representative Otten.
Yeah, I think the school sentinel program was set up here a few years ago, and I really do think that more school districts should be utilizing that. You hate to admit it, it's the world we live in today with that stuff. It's not right. And unfortunately, we have to go to these extremes some days to make sure our kids are safe. I have 2 kids in school. I have one in T and one in Harrisburg. And there was the shooting in one of those schools, in the past. And I think my schools are all doing a good job. But, I think they need to remain being proactive in this whole thing. And I would just hate to see something happen here and where something was just slipping through the cracks. So anything and everything that they can do with the programs that are out there, I sure hope that they continue to do it.
Thank you, Senator Otten.
I am just heartbroken, saddened that our society in general has degraded to this. But not only here in America, but across the world. Now, if you're thinking that you can take away a gun and it's going to solve it, China just had 33 people dead and another 100 wounded by a knife attack. It's a condition of the heart. The condition of the heart. When we've got our kids watching games and playing on games and they're killing bugs and it's realistic and whatnot, and you don't think that this is going to affect people? When we don't have the ability to actually be able to talk openly and critique your idea or your anger, and you've got to break it down to violence? Maybe the answer is for all of us to start going to church again and actually listen to what's going on.
Please, your comments to yourselves. Thank you.
I'm serious. It is a condition of the heart. At the end of the day, it is a condition of the heart of the individual doing this. It is the condition of my heart. Understanding that I am a sinner. Thank you.
Anyone else? Senator Nesbitt?
I'll see if I can add a little to the conversation. I would actually oppose the Sentinel program that a few folks have spoken in favor of here, and I don't think it's going to become generally applicable because I think the adults in the room here are the insurance companies, and that it's really hard to get insurance at your school if you have somebody that's armed wandering around. And I think that's been one of the obstacles actually is insurance. This isn't just an abstract idea for me. My day job is I teach economics at Augustana, so Monday morning I'll walk into 103. I'm glad that we now have locks on the inside of the room, and I always tell the student who sits closest to the door that he or she is responsible for that. And it's not a conversation I used to have when I started at Augustana 23 years ago. And I know there's other teachers out here in the crowd today too, and they sure as heck don't want to be taking a gun to school. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that if we start arming teachers, that many of them would quit. And so, again, I think part of this is these are kids that sounded like a troubled kid that all sorts of opportunities to intervene in his life in a productive way had failed, but yeah, maybe there's other ways to do that. I think we already have our schools almost on a lockdown. I don't want to put metal detectors in them. I hope that's not the direction we're going, just like I hope we don't have a Capitol building. I'm so glad we have a Capitol building we can walk in and out of without a metal detector. So again, we need to create a safer society within which those schools exist.
Thank you. Another stack that I have are regarding the various measures that would impact how things get on the ballot. SGR 1, SGR 1007, 1008, and then there were several more mentioned as well. So the question I'm going to summarize from all of these are what changes do you support to our process to consider initiated measures and constitutional amendments? Representative Ladderall.
Thank you. Yes, we did see a lot of these come through, and I just wanted to say that a lot of these ideas, the fact that we're taking a look at this, it comes from the people that I'm talking to, not just people in the legislature who are trying to make changes to make things more difficult, but the people who are having to vote on these things, they want to make sure that the process is working for South Dakotans, and that's really my priority when I'm looking at all these things. You know, I don't want to make it difficult for the people of South Dakota to enact a law, because often I find situations where the legislature refuses to do something on a topic that I think needs to be done and is widely supported by the people. So I don't want to make that more difficult. What I do want to make sure of is that it is really a grassroots group of South Dakotans who want to get that done. I don't want to have it so somebody can come in from another state and pay a bunch of people to swarm the state and get mislead people on what they're signing, put it on the ballot, put out an advertisement with millions of dollars and say, you know, vote for the great thing for your children, but then of course it has 17 unintended consequences. So one of the things that I support would be making sure when you're getting your signatures for your ballot measure that's going to affect the entire state of South Dakota, that you can't get all of your signatures just in Sioux Falls. You've got to spread it out a little bit and get some signatures from Rapid City, some from Aberdeen, some from Sioux Falls. That makes sure that when the people of our state want to do something, we can do it. But you can't just pay 20 people to roam around Sioux Falls and mislead people to get something on the ballot. One other small one that I would support is, this isn't going anywhere, but print the entire measure that you're voting on the ballot. That would have an effect on what ends up getting on there.
Thank you, Senator Ratten.
I served on the initiative and referendum task force this summer, and we came up with, I think, some pretty good proposals. One thing that I've been working on for the last 2 years is SB 77. You'll see that this year when you go to actually vote on all the measures themselves. There will be a fiscal note attached to it. We did some, went back in there, cleaned it up, make sure that all the measures this year will have it on. It's now on the House floor. Hopefully we'll get that done. And then we actually went through and revised 77 to make sure that it flowed properly. And so that has been done. One of the things that actually may not think that we actually can actually reason up there. I served with Senator Nessebar. On the political spectrum, we are on the far opposite ends. And yet, we're able to work together. We were able to find the compromise, look at the legislation itself, and come up with some real decent stuff. So if you're thinking that we're out trying to ram around something, that's for this thing. The last thing to think about is that when you look at a problem, there's 105 different ideas out there. All that has to be flushed through the system, all that has to be critiqued, and at the end of the day, only judged by what comes out of the session.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead, Senator.
The one thing I would support specifically is narrowing the initiated measures to a single topic, like we have to have in our legislation. When you get an initiated measure 22 that was 34 pages long, covering 70 different sections of law, you get things that just don't belong there, that need to stand or fall on their own. When we deal with legislation, I have to introduce it. It goes through a committee hearing in my chamber. where any of the people on that committee can address concerns, can amend it. It then goes to the floor, same process. In the Senate, we've got 34 other people looking at it, making suggestions on ways to improve it. It then goes to the other side, has a full committee hearing, and then again has to go to the floor. So things are vetted well, but yet we still have a single subject limitation on what we bring as bills. And again, that's the one thing that I would support changing. Otherwise, I do believe the citizens initiative measures is a good program and needs to be continued without stepping on it any more than is absolutely necessary.
Senator Curtin?
Well, this is probably the only area where Reynold and I actually agree on something. It's actually not true. We agree on about 90% of what we do in the Senate, I think, in general. Maybe that's high. If it's a good idea, which it usually is, and it comes from me. But some of the discussion that has developed around the initiated measure process has been, I think, significantly productive. Thing that concerns me, you heard Senator Stalter talk about it, is if we arrange the rules and criteria in such a constrictive way, it may have the unintended consequence of only allowing the best funded and the most external to our state to bring things up to the initiative measure process. Things like requiring signatures from every county in the state. Well, only a well-funded operation can do that. And I'm still very intrigued about the idea of a group of people from Woonsocket being very motivated and passionate about a subject and camping out in a population center and bringing their case to the people in those locations and getting something on the ballot for all of us to consider. So I think some of the things that we've taken a look at, like the fiscal note that was mentioned, so people know how much a thing might cost, single subject, providing the entire informational piece on initiative measure when you sign the petition. I think those things are all healthy and should be part of the process. But when we make so many hurdles that it becomes burdensome, I think we come dangerously close to preventing a citizen from engaging in the process, which was the original intent, and setting it up so that only large activist groups can participate in it. And I think that's a step in the wrong direction. So in general, Reynold and I think agree about that part of it at least, maybe not some of the other components, but I think we need to be cautious about how we approach large-scale changes to that, because it's part and parcel about what South Dakota is.
Senator Nesbitt?
Right. Thank you. I'm glad that Dr. Curtin and I, he brought up that idea about putting the full text in a handout. That was one of those great bills that came out of our task force that Senator Otten and I worked on, and it died in partisan lines in the Senate floor. Another one of those great ideas to go down. And yesterday was crossover day, and many of us do wear black to mourn the death of all of our good ideas that didn't make it to the other side. Initiated measures, I thought we had a really fantastic process working with Senator Otten, Senator Bolin, Karin Soley, Kent Peterson, Tim Reed on that, and we really worked together. We considered many different ideas. We brought forward 10 different bills, and I think that Senator Otten and I agreed on 8 of those. What I'm most concerned about is the flurry of other 15 that came out of, didn't come out, and that were really trying to clamp down on the process. And again, we need to remember that in South Dakota, the state motto is, under God, the people rule, and we need to continue to maintain access to the ballot. And that part of the problem is represented up here on the podium, right? There's one Democrat and a whole bunch of Republicans. But 52% of the state is registered as something besides Republican, right? The state's 48% Republican, 30% Democrat, 22% independent, and our legislature just doesn't reflect our voter registration. And so I think there's frustration, and that's where some of those initiated measures come from. Thanks.
Representative Jameson?
Thank you. The initiated measure, the ballot question, is certainly under review. You know, a lot of ways that things get analyzed is through that summer study process or a task force. And the only reason that they get created is because there's a tremendous amount of interest either from the public and or from legislators who say, you know, we ought to take a closer look at this. And there were certainly and have been proposals that have been tried and failed, limiting or prohibiting out-of-state money, all kinds of different ways that maybe had gone too far, at least in the minds of most of the legislators. I was one of those guys who was a part of this discussion in a way and proposed an idea that did pass through the House. And the intentions for my bill that did pass, is, the purpose of it really is to acknowledge that money does come from out of state. And what I passed through the House was a disclaimer that will be required on all marketing materials that if that ballot measure accepts more than $10,000 from out of state. The whole intention of it all is to put the trust back into the voter. Just inform them, let them know. They can make their own decision and decide what's right or wrong. But I saw it as a kind of a compromise to addressing the issue at hand that, you know, when South Dakota is used as a test tube for testing a ballot measure, we ought to have the public better informed. And that was my intention.
Thank you. All right, this 90 minutes always goes so fast, and I'm always tempted to sneak one more in, but I know then I will get you all out of here late, and then if I have one job, it's to get us out of here on time. So we're going to go to closing statements. You each have 90 seconds, and we're going to start with Representative Lattimer.
Thank you. When we're going through the end of session here, we're looking at the different priorities that we have to spend the state budget on, and it looks like we are going to have somewhere around $10 million to allocate to priorities. I think the community service providers, which take care of our least advantaged people, have proven that there's a need there to get the staffing up. So we're looking at allocating some more funding in that direction. But one of the main things that I think we have a responsibility to do also is do some structural things which empower the people for the long term. And so while we're balancing the priorities for the short term, one of the ideas I brought that I hope to bring again next year is to empower people in the states for the long term. I had an idea to change the way that U.S. Senate candidates were nominated, and I did get quite a few sponsors. We didn't get it passed this year, but the reasoning behind it would be, right now, if you want to run for United States Senate, you get your name on the ballot with a petition, and then you go to a primary. In the primary, usually the candidate with the most money and highest name ID wins. So it really isn't that effective an accountability measure here in South Dakota. If you change it to the way the founders wrote the Constitution originally, to where the state legislators actually had more of a say in what the U.S. senators were chosen, you would have a better ability as citizens to have leverage over your United States senator. So rather than taking away your ability to control what happens in the U.S. Senate, you would increase it, because you really can get an audience with your U.S. senator through your state legislator, and you really can affect who your U.S. senator would be by working on your state legislative races. So that's an idea I hope to bring back next year to try to empower people and give more strength to the state.
Thank you, Senator Allen.
Thank you. It indeed is an honor to get to come here. I want to backtrack to taxation. One of the big deals on 106 that happened was Senator Peters, who belongs to NCLS. Senator Peters is now the president of NCLS. She has spearheaded the 106, which is our taxation of what we were talking about here before. And anyway, I'm also now put on that assault task force. And so when it comes to taxation, it's very important to me that taxation, A, must be broad, it must be fair. When we look at the structure of taxation and you start having stuff coming into state taxation, one of the things that I always look for is the mechanism which is being proposed, is it stable? One of the things that we had when we were talking about the food taxes a few minutes ago, it was not a stable source, and it comes to one of my greater pet peeves, as you know. I hate the excise tax on contractors. So at least when you walk away here knowing one thing, and you say excise tax, you can say Senator Otten hates the excise tax. I'll hate it today, I'll hate it tomorrow, I'll hate it next year, and if I get reelected, I will go up there and I will hate it then. It's a VAT tax, don't like it. With that, I guess I will just thank you very much for coming, and thanks for listening to me.
Representative Otten.
Just like to thank everybody for coming out today and asking us all these questions. It's the best way for the citizens to get out there and connect with their legislators and find out their thoughts and feelings of what's going on. Representative Lattimer touched on the budget stuff a little bit. I'll probably just expand just a bit. He mentioned the community support providers. Hopefully we'll be getting some more money as there is some additional dollars, or it looks like there's going to be some additional dollars available. The Precision Ag building up at Brookings, going to be looking to try to move some money up that way to do something for K-12 education, a little bit more than what had been planned. The state employees, health insurance, maybe see if we can assist them out on that and some of those rising costs. And then you have a state's vet cemetery. So we're going to, they're looking for $600,000 for that. I don't know if they're going to get all of those funds or not, but we're definitely looking to help them out on that and get them going. They've asked some land that will be donated to them, and I think that's something that needs to happen, and I will push to get them what they need.
Senator Smeltzer.
Well, I don't even need to transition from Representative Otten because I'm the prime sponsor of the Veteran Cemetery Bill. And we are having continuing negotiations tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock to try to get this thing, or Monday morning, sorry, try to get this pushed over the House. But basically, the city of Sioux Falls has offered to donate a minimum of 40 acres of land located somewhere along I-90 and 229, about a half mile north and a half a mile east. We then do surveying, find the best location. Federal government will then build the entire cemetery for a cost of $6 million. In the meantime, we will have had to come up with $600,000 to do the surveying and so on, but once the federal government issues the grant for the building, we get that back. And I believe we've got an agreement that we can take $450,000 one-time money this year, and then $150,000 next year, which would also go into maintenance. And the vets are also willing to create an endowment fund to try to help finance that as we go forward, so that it'll be a shared cost between the vets and the citizens of South Dakota.
Thank you. Well, I too would like to thank you for coming and visiting with us today. I know this isn't the most ideal circumstance, and believe me, all of us would prefer to be able to go one-on-one with each of you, but just from the number of people in the room, you can see how that would be very difficult for that part. We've talked briefly about the upcoming election. All 105 legislators are up for re-election this year. If you think we've been doing a good job on your behalf, you might want to seek one of us out if you live in our district and say, hey, can I sign your petition? If you think we're doing a terrible job, I'd invite you to go down to the courthouse on Monday morning and get your petitions and go get those signatures and come and join us. Join in the fun. So thanks again for being here. We appreciate it.
Representative Jameson.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming, and thank you for sponsoring the event. I'm going to take just a little different approach. I didn't really think about this before I started, so bear with me. I will not be back. I mean, these are my farewell closing statements, if you will. I've chosen another path for myself, and I did see at least one and two candidates out there who were running for my seat. And all I've just got to share with you is my experience has been tremendous. I have learned so much about the state, so much about the people all across the state. All these characters I've met from every nook and cranny of the state of South Dakota. The West Side guys, you know, they call me a flatlander over here, and I call them something else. But all I wanted to say is, in my closing time, is really that it's been a privilege. And I encourage anybody, if you've got a chance, if you've got the ability, if you've got the time, if you don't run yourself, encourage somebody else to do it. Engage in the process. You being here today, you've already engaged in that, and that's great. But I can tell you from sitting here, from the chance and time that I've had to serve, it's a privilege, and it will stay with you the rest of your life, I'm sure. But I'm just so thankful to have had a chance, so thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nezaba.
Great. Thank you. And a thank you to Sarah and to Harriet and John and Deborah. Thank you for making this happen. And again, thank you to all of you for following what's going on in state government. There's an infinite number of other things you could be paying attention to, and I'm really glad that you're civically engaged in watching what we're doing, whether you agree with me or not. I mean that sincerely. I also bring you greetings today from Representative Karen Soley. She's been facing some healthcare problems, and she's been unable to serve, but I am carrying her petition, so if there's anybody here from District 15, I would love to see you afterwards and have you sign her petition. She does plan to run again to represent this district here in District 15. My main priorities, I spend my days on appropriations, and I really do hope that we can get this cemetery in Sioux Falls and get that done. By the way, every senator and every representative signed off on that, so it's an ongoing conversation with the governor, and the governor simply wants to make sure we have enough money to fund it. He's not evil on this, he's being prudent. He wants to make sure that we have enough money to take care of it indefinitely. And again, I think I could, I have agreements with each one of these gentlemen up here. One of the things, the most important thing I've learned in here is that there are no permanent enemies. Senator Stalzer and I will argue with each other on the Senate floor, and we'll find ourselves a few minutes later in military affairs and veterans affairs, and he's voting in favor of my women veterans license plate bill. And so that's how it works in here. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Curd.
Well, I have three things. Number one, I'd like to thank our law enforcement for being here today to make sure that the senators and representatives didn't get out of line up here on the dais. Both the individual you can see in uniform and those that are here that are not in uniform, thank you for being here to help us out today, because Reynold can get out of line pretty quick. Second thing is, you may have seen a note handed to me when I stepped off the stage, so there wasn't anything secret going on. The lady said, "You look dashing in that flannel shirt and yellow vest." Did you buy it online? And I hope you remitted your sales tax if you did. And then the third thing is audience participation time. You've been asking us questions all morning, and now I have one for all of you, and we'll just do a little handful here. And that's the following. This November, we're going to see a large number of things on the ballot through the initiative major process and referred things from the legislature. And I want to know that if you would be interested in the opportunity to learn more about those through a broadcasting format that's available statewide on television and on radio, instead of just getting the 30-second sound bites that you see through some commercial. And the reason that I'm asking that is that I'm working closely with members of the House and providing a format for that, where there'll be probably an hour-long or so program where there'll be proponents of the initiative measure and opponents, and then another 20 minutes or so for questions from legislators and also from the public.
You're gonna have to get your hands
I think that would be tremendously valuable and resource and asset that we have not had in the state before, and that there is some significant broadcaster interest in that, and therefore funding to go along with it. So those that would like to see that and think it's a good idea, I'd like to see if your hands can go up, and those that you think, well, that's pretty easy.
Thank you.
All right, well, we'll continue pushing forward on it, so keep your eyes and ears peeled, because I think you're going to find the opportunity to do that here as
Thank you, Senator Curd. I'm giving him a little leeway since I was calling him the wrong, from the wrong house for most of the morning. So thank you, Senator Curd. Let's give all of our legislators a round of applause for being here and taking all of our questions this morning. And I did just want to mention the issue that I was not able to get addressed, although I was pleased some folks mentioned the veteran cemetery funding. The other issues that came up that, again, we weren't able to ask a specific question, the NRA invitation to come to South Dakota, the NRA's money in elections, funding for community health centers, emotional support animals, errors in bill writing and the impact on the process, impact of federal money or federal policy on our ag money, prescription drug access, third-party candidate access to the system, conceal and carry permits, collective bargaining, and there were also several other on gun safety legislation as well. I want to thank again our sponsors, the Sioux Falls Area Chamber of Commerce, the Sioux Falls League of Women Voters, AARP, the American Association of University Women, Sioux Falls Education Association, Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, and Lead South Dakota. And again, we'd also like to thank the Holiday Inn City Center, USA Media, as well as all of the volunteers who made this morning happen. Thanks to the audience for coming. I'm sorry we're running a little late, and everyone drive safely as you get home. Thank you.
Folks, anybody else want to entertain us?
We don't come up here to entertain you. We come up here to inform you.
What kind of morons run this outfit?